briefing on the approval of the release of the national examinations results. This morning, without wasting time, I am going to give over to my boss, Dr. Mafura Kometsi, to start with the briefing. But before I can do that, I just want to ask you to please put your cell phones on silent so that we can have minimum disruptions during the briefing. And immediately after the briefing, we will allow time for questions. So that is basically it from me for now. I will now hand over to the CEO of Umalusi, Dr. Mafura Kometsi, to start with the briefing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taunyani. It is my honor to introduce the following panelists. The chairperson of Umalusi Council, sitting on my right hand side, Professor John Volning. On my far left is Professor Eunice Balim, the chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee of Council, and a member of Umalusi Council, Professor Eunice Balim. On my immediate left is Nezola Mutimakwani, Executive Manager, Quality Assurance and Monitoring Branch at Umalusi. I also wish to acknowledge the other executive managers, Mr. Hendrik van der Walt, Chief Financial Officer, who is in the audience, sitting there, and Mr. Emmanuel Sibanda, Executive Manager, Qualifications and Research, in absentia. Umalusi staff, I see a lot of senior managers in the audience, representatives of different assessment bodies present here, journalists representing different media houses. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Umalusi is pleased to announce the outcome of its quality assurance processes for the 2021 national examinations after another turbulent year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, the harsh realities of the pandemic continue to plague our system for the second year in succession. It has indeed become clear that the fluidity and uncertainty caused by COVID-19 will remain with us for the foreseeable future. Therefore, we cannot wish it away. However, we can be innovative in how we navigate the new normal, as it is called. Thus, all stakeholders in education need to find ways to still do their work effectively and efficiently despite the pandemic. The same applies to Umalusi. Today, as we look back to what transpired in 2021, I wish to once again, on behalf of Umalusi Council and staff, to express my sincere condolences to all stakeholders in the education sector who lost their loved ones because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Umalusi is entrusted with the critical task of assuring the quality assurance of the entire value chain of the national examination processes. Umalusi has committed itself to carry out its legislative mandate to ensure that the qualifications within its sub-framework of qualifications retain their currency and utility. Regarding the quality assurance processes undertaken by Umalusi, the results of the following assessment bodies were submitted to Umalusi for quality assurance and standardization. Independent Examinations Board, IEB, National Senior Certificate, and the General Education and Training Certificate, ABET Level 4. South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Sakai, National Senior Certificate, and the General Education and Training Certificate, ABET Level 4. Department of Basic Education, DBE, National Senior Certificate. Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET, General Education and Training Certificate, ABET Level 4, and National Certificate Vocational, NCV. Please note that the Benchmark Assessment Agency has merged with Sakai to form one assessment body operating as the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Sakai. Section 17A of Umalusi's Founding Act, the General and Further Education and Training Act, GENFECRA Act, number 58 of 2001, amended in 2008, states that as part of its standardization process, Council may adjust raw marks. As a quality council in general and further education and training, Umalusi has the national duty to ensure that high quality education standards are maintained across all assessment bodies, both private and public. To this end, Umalusi uses the yardstick to quality assure the work of all assessment bodies. It uses the same yardstick. It doesn't differ from one assessment body to the other. It is important to remember that in line with Section 28, subsection 2 of the Constitution, a child's best interests are of paramount importance in every matter concerning the child. Therefore, the most important beneficiary of Umalusi's quality assurance work are the learners who are eager to know whether Umalusi has done its work to ensure the credibility of their hard-earned qualifications. Let me take this opportunity to thank all Umalusi appointed moderators and monitors, members of the Assessment Standards Committee, as well as Umalusi staff, for putting immense effort in assuring the quality of assessment and examinations year after year. Now, let me give you a little bit about the class of 2021. The class of 2021 was the 8th grade 12 cohort to write final examinations under the Curriculum Assessment Policy Statement, also known as CAPS. Unfortunately, unlike the 2020 cohort, the class of 2021 was subjected to the realities of COVID-19 pandemic for 2 consecutive years. This entailed, amongst others, hybrid modes of teaching and learning, such as online and rotational classes. In 2021, the Department of Basic Education registered approximately 733,917 full-time and 162,793 part-time candidates, with a total of approximately 896,710 candidates for the 2021 National Senior Certificate Examination. Furthermore, the class of 2021 was also the 2nd grade 12 cohort to be assessed under stringent health and safety conditions necessitated by the lockdown conditions, in line with the Disaster Management Act 57 of 2002. About the standardization processes, let me briefly outline what the standardization process entails. Any large-scale examination process invariably has many and varied sources of variability. Most of these are unplanned, unintended, and undesirable. They vary from mistakes in a question paper to subtle issues of level of difficulty of a question paper and possible multiple and valid interpretations of questions. Standardization of learner performance is an important quality assurance process used worldwide to mitigate the impact of learner performance caused by factors other than the learner's subject knowledge, ability, and aptitude. There are two main objectives of standardization. First, to ensure that the cohort of learners is not advantaged or disadvantaged by factors other than their knowledge of the subject, abilities, and aptitude. Second, to achieve comparability and consistency of learner performance across the years and the various subjects within the given year. In short, ladies and gentlemen, standardization seeks to mitigate fluctuations in learner performance that are a result of factors within the examination process, rather than the knowledge, aptitude, or abilities of learners, while simultaneously retaining real gains made as a result of improved teaching and learning and systemic interventions. The Assessment Standards Committee carries out Umalusi standardization work. This is a committee of counsel which is constituted by highly qualified academics who are willing to sacrifice their valuable time during the festive season to ensure the best outcome for our learners. The standardization decisions are all informed by qualitative and statistical reports, which include marking and moderation reports, statistical data, as well as evidence-based reports from various assessment bodies. Subjects are standardized individually and in a non-iterative manner. Most significantly, the South African public needs to know that the standardization process is cumulative. It starts with the appointment of examiners, setting of question papers, moderation of question papers, verification of marking, and the ultimate standardization meetings, whose processes mark the end of the actual standardization process. There are 8 principles of standardization which guide the process. However, for this briefing, I will mention only 2 of these due to their significance. Our preference is to accept raw marks as a fair reflection of learner performance. Secondly, in general, no adjustment should exceed 10% of the total mark of the paper on the historical average. Should be evident from the above 2 principles that one cannot have a fixed level of adjustment. An appropriate scaling operation must be employed to be consistent with these principles of standardization. In instances where raw examination marks are accepted, it is because, first, the examination has been judged to have been of an appropriate level. Second, the learner performance is in line with the average historical learner performance profile in the subject. Third, the conduct and management of the examination in the subject were not compromised. Council needs to satisfy itself that all assessment bodies have been subject to the following quality assurance measures before it can approve the publication of the results: moderation and approval of question papers, verification of the moderation of internal assessments, monitoring of the conduct of examinations, monitoring of the marking process, verification of marking, and the standardization of results. Regarding the conduct of exams, Umalusi commends all assessment bodies for doing their best to comply with COVID-19 regulations in the administration, conduct, and management of the 2021 national examinations. Umalusi also commends assessment bodies for exploiting the benefits of technology to conduct the bulk of their work during this period. The use of online platforms for online meetings and the introduction of online quality assurance and approval systems is highly commendable. With regard to marking, Umalusi notes with a great deal of empathy the destruction of the Albert Moroka Marking Center in Tabanchu, Free State, by a storm that ravaged the area on 15 December 2021. Be that as it may, we also want to convey our gratitude to the teachers who risked their own lives to salvage all the accounting paper 2 and business studies paper 2 scripts. We also note that during the marking of the 2021 national examination scripts, numerous markers on different levels, examiners, moderators, and monitors were forced to withdraw themselves from the process because of testing positive for COVID-19. Umalusi conducted the monitoring of marking and related processes across all assessment bodies. More importantly, Umalusi moderators drew a sample of learner script to verify the quality of marking in various subjects. Umalusi attended online marking guideline meetings whose purpose is to standardize and approve the marking guidelines for various subjects. Therefore, Umalusi is satisfied with the notable improvement in the quality of question papers submitted across different assessment bodies. To ensure consistency, we have met with all assessment bodies in the past few days and pointed out to them the need to address some areas of non-compliance which require their undivided attention going forward. Furthermore, Umalusi would also like to once again weigh in on the so-called 30% debate that was recently covered by the media. Unfortunately, this debate has been with us for quite some time, and Umalusi has written articles on this matter in the past. In a nutshell, Umalusi's position is that in line with international practice, there are 3 levels of passes, namely bachelor pass, the diploma pass, and the higher certificate pass. Each level requires a specific combination of marks per subject. None of these levels require learners to pass all their subjects with 30%. In fact, if learners were to obtain 30% of all subjects, they would fail. In those pass levels where 30% is the minimum pass mark for some of the subject, it is precisely that, a minimum. Pass rates at these levels are as old as the matric certificate itself, which is more than 100 years old. With the old senior certificate, which used to have a higher grade pass at 40%, a standard grade pass at 33 1/3, and a lower grade pass at 25%. We have to remind each other what the purpose of the National Senior Certificate is. The National Senior Certificate enables learners to gain access to a variety of post-school opportunities depending on their performance in grade 12. The opportunities include entry-level employment, admission to learnerships and internships, and admission to colleges, universities, and other higher education institutions. The NSC serves a multiplicity of purposes. That said, the National Senior Certificate remains a valuable qualification that diligent learners can use to study at institutions outside the borders of our country. Regrettably, Umalusi has learned of a new disturbing trend in which learners are given early access to question papers a few hours before they write. This has been detected in a few centers in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. We are not able to provide further details regarding this matter, regarding this irregularity, as investigations are still going on. According to examination guidelines, examination papers can only be opened in the examination room 30 minutes before the commencement of the examination to allow for distribution and reading time. Obviously, Umalusi takes this matter seriously. Professor Volnik will make a pronouncement on the punitive measures the Council is taking in this matter. I further want to caution learners against joining WhatsApp groups supposedly meant to help them to prepare for the examinations. The problem with these WhatsApp groups is that if a paper is shared on such a platform, all group members are implicated by association, including those who do not intend to cheat. Consequently, this can make their lives, the lives of well-meaning learners miserable. I also need to point out that sadly, incidents of group copying are still detected in the writing of national examinations across assessment bodies, albeit on a lesser scale. Umalusi strongly condemns such incidents, and all implicated individuals must be brought to book. Professor Volnik will also provide a brief update on the investigation into the leakage of physical sciences papers 2 and mathematics paper 2 in 2020. Once again, Umalusi appeals to all stakeholders involved in the examination process to refrain from engaging in unscrupulous acts of dishonesty. Umalusi takes a dim view of all forms of irregularities during the writing of examinations, as they have the potential to compromise the integrity and credibility of the examinations. As a result, there are serious consequences for those who are found guilty of such criminal activities, regardless of whether they are learners or officials. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to inform the audience that Umalusi is celebrating his 20th anniversary this year, having taken over from the South African Certification Council subset in 2002. The past 20 years have seen the organization growing in leaps and bounds, and we owe our gratitude to all stakeholders who have supported the work of Umalusi over the years. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. I thank you for listening to me. Please join me in welcoming the Umalusi Chairperson of Council, Professor John Volnik, to present Umalusi's findings and conclusions regarding the examinations run by the following assessment bodies: the IEB, Independent Examinations Board, South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Sakai, Department of Basic Education, DBE, and the Department of Higher Education and Training for their 2021 examinations. I thank you for listening to me. Over to you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Umalusi. Good morning, members of the media. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I concur with the CEO, Dr. Umalusi, that the 2020 and 2021 academic years have been very difficult years due to the challenges posed by COVID-19. But Umalusi, tried its best and remained faithful to its legislative mandate of quality assuring assessment at exit points. The quality assurance of national examinations is an essential aspect of maintaining quality in the administration, conduct, and management of national exams. It is one way we can ensure that the integrity of the examinations is not compromised. So to this end, since the 16th of December, members of the Umalusi Standards Committee, led by Professor Ballum at the end, and the Umalusi staff, have worked very hard to complete the work of reviewing and moderating the results of learners in the following qualifications, and I'm going to get right into it. But let me just mention, there's the Department of Basic Education, NSC, as well as the Senior Certificate Amended. And then there's the Independent Examination Board, or IEB, who also offers NSC and the GETC. Then the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, or SACAI, they offer NSC and GETC. And lastly, the Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET, who offers NCV as well as the GETC, ABET. But the quality assurance processes for the native programs, the N2 to N3 for the DHET, will be finalized in the month of March this year. So we're not going to be speaking about that. So I will now focus on the approval decisions per qualification, starting with the NSC. The NSC is offered by the three assessment bodies, as I've said, the DBE, IEB, and SACAI, and we will start with the DBE. The 2021 matric cohort was the first cohort, as Dr. Akumetsi has pointed out, to experience the realities of the pandemic for 2 consecutive years. In other words, these learners went through the pandemic during their grade 11 in 2020, and again in their grade 12 year in 2021. And Umalusi Council empathizes with the learners, as well as the teachers and the parents who were faced with these harsh realities and had to endure all the challenges. I just want to mention, because it's worth noting, that the DBE introduced a new subject this year, namely marine sciences, for the first time. And that was administered in the November exam. Based on the information received from the DBE, the number of candidates registered for the exam, as Dr. Akumetsi has pointed out, was 733,917 full-time, and in part-time, 162,793. That gives a total of 896,710. And if you recall, last year, in 2020, there were 726,335. So the 2021 growth was a growth of over 170,000 this year. Huge growth in numbers. And a total of 67 subjects were presented for standardization. And I just want to say for the DBE, raw marks were accepted for 35 of the 67 subjects, and that represents 52% of the total number of subjects, remained unchanged. but moderation with mainly upward shifts towards the average historical learner performance profile, or in other words, upward adjustment, was affected on 28 subjects. That's 40% of the subjects were adjusted upwards. And I can mention them at this point. The subjects that were adjusted upwards were physical science, history, religion studies, tourism, agriculture management practices, agricultural technology, design, visual arts, civil technology, civil service, civil technology construction, and civil technology woodworking. Then we come to mechanical technology. There's mechanical technology automotive and mechanical technology fitting and machining. Those were also, all of these were adjusted upwards. Engineering, graphics and design, accounting was adjusted upwards. Economics, English, home language, Setswana, home language, isiXhosa, home language, Sepedi, home language, Sesotho, home language, South African Sign Language, home language, adjusted upwards. We may come back to that later, because we are troubled by this subject. Afrikaans, first edition language, isiZulu, first edition language, Setswana, first edition language, Siswati, first edition language, and isiXhosa, first edition language, Afrikaans, second edition language. So all those subjects, the 28 that I just mentioned, were adjusted upwards. Then downwards. Downward shifts were effected on 4 subjects. And they were technical mathematics, isiNdebele, home language, Siswati, home language, Sesotho, second edition language. Now if you compare that with 2020, we had 65 subjects and 74% of them were left raw. Remember I said that this year we only left 52% as raw. In 2020, 74% were left as raw. And 9 subjects, or 14%, of the remaining 17 were adjusted upwards, while 8 or 12% of the subjects were adjusted downwards. And so we have, as a summary, for this year, there were 67 subjects, 35 remained raw, that's 52%, upwards 28 or 40%, and downwards only 4 or 8%. Our dependence on a robust standardization process to assure quality remains in place. And Dr. Rakumesi has outlined that in great detail, so I'm not going to go back over what he's already said. Simply to say that standardization aims, in the main, to achieve equivalence of the standard of the examination across years and subjects and assessment bodies, and to produce learners who are equipped to enroll at universities and colleges and enter the world of work. And Dr. Rakumesi has outlined the processes that are used. And given the complex nature of the stages and processes that he had outlined, it can lead to misinterpretation, especially if one observes any one of the stages in isolation of the rest, or just the final one. The whole process of standardization is the basis for Umalusi to declare exams fair and valid and credible, and thereby building public trust and confidence. Now, just a word about the irregularities. Umalusi conducts not only the process of standardization, which is required for national exams, but also through rigorous procedures assures the quality of the entire examination process. Gaining the approval of Umalusi Council for the release of the results is determined by the examination's level of compliance with regulations and policies and directives and guidelines issued by both Umalusi and each of the assessment bodies. Now, systematic irregularities are exam irregularities or malpractices that compromise the integrity of the examination as a whole, on a large scale. For example, when there's a paper leak that has the potential to affect the subject in the entire circuit or a district or an entire province or even nationwide. So Umalusi requires that each assessment body provide a report on irregularity. Now sadly, as Dr. Rakometsi had mentioned, there is now a new trend of unauthorized or early access to question papers. No question paper should be opened before 8:30 in the morning. We know that the papers are kept and stored at the district offices or similar place. And then it's taken to distribution centers. And from those distribution centers, at 6:30 in the morning or later, on the day of the writing, the principal of the school goes and collects them. And whether 6:30 or 7:30, no paper can be opened until 8:30. And what Dr. Rakometsi has said, unfortunately, a new trend of unauthorized and early access to question papers was detected at specific examination centers in KZN and Gauteng. Specifically, life sciences and agricultural sciences were affected by this examination malpractice. It's also worrying when people who are entrusted, people in authority, they're entrusted with the responsibility of administering and managing the examinations, are the very ones who compromise the integrity of examinations under a misguided pretext of wanting to, quote, help learners. Umalusi will be working hard with the DBE to ensure that the necessary measures are taken to stamp out this practice and to bring those who are responsible to book. The NSC is widely regarded as a flagship qualification that provides access to other opportunities such as admission to university, admission to post-school education, and as an entry point to the world of work. And for that reason, that all stakeholders in education have the immense responsibility of ensuring that the quality and integrity of this important qualification is not compromised. So, Umalusi Council makes the following statement about the DBE NSC results of 2021. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of the Umalusi Council noted that apart from some examination irregularities identified during the writing and marking of the examinations, there were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the credibility and integrity of the November 2021 NSC examinations as a whole. That exam administered by the Department of Basic Education and Training. The Executive Committee of Council approves, therefore, the release of the DBE November 2021 NSC examination results based on available evidence that the examinations were administered largely in accordance with the examination policies and regulations, but in respect of identified irregularities that I've mentioned and Dr. Akameti, the DBE is required to block the results of candidates implicated in irregularities, including the candidates involved in group copying pending the outcome of further DBE investigation and Umalusi verification, and in the cases where candidates had early unauthorized access to question papers, the results of the implicated candidates should be blocked pending further DBE investigation and Umalusi verification. So the DBE is required to address the directives for compliance and improvement highlighted in the quality assurance of assessment, and to develop and submit an improvement plan and present that to Umalusi by the 15th of March 2022. But we want particular attention to be paid to recurring matters of non-compliance. Overall, Umalusi is happy to commend the DPE for conducting a successful examination despite the challenges presented by COVID-19. So let me move on quickly now to the other NSC examinations administered firstly by the IEB and then by Sakai. For the IEB, in total, 12,857 full-time candidates and 968 part-time candidates wrote the NSC exam set by the IEB and administered by the IEB. And they had a total of 65 subjects that they presented for standardization, and after moderation, raw marks were accepted for 44 of those subjects, which represents 68% of the IEB subjects were left as raw. And upward shifts was affected on 14 subjects, or 21% of the subjects, and I may just mention them. For the IB, the following subjects were adjusted upwards: accounting, Afrikaans, first additional language, computer applications technology, consumer studies, economics, history, information technology, maritime economics, mathematical literacy, music, physical sciences, Sesotho first additional language, Sesotho home language, Siswati first additional language, and those are the 14 subjects. Now downward shifts were effected on the remaining 7 subjects, or 11%, and the subjects adjusted downwards were agricultural sciences, English, first additional language, geography, German, second additional language, hospitality studies, Tamil, second additional language, as well as tourism. So in total, of the 65 subjects, 44 raw, 14 upwards, that's 21%, and 7 downwards, 11%. Final decision by EXCO, having studied all the evidence presented by the EXCO, the EXCO of Umalusi Council noted that apart from some examination irregularities, which were identified during the writing of the examinations, there were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the credibility of and integrity of the November 2021 NSC examination administered by the IEB. Therefore, the Executive Committee of Council approves the release of the IEB November 2021 NSC examinations based on available evidence that the exams were administered in accordance with the examination policies and regulations. But the IB is required to nullify the results of the candidate implicated in the examination irregularity and address the directives for compliance and improvement highlighted in the quality assurance of assessment report and submit an improvement plan by the 15th of March to Umalusi. The Executive Committee of Council commends the IB for conducting a successful examination despite the challenges presented by COVID-19. Then just very briefly, the GETC administered by the IB, there were 495 candidates who registered for November 2021 for the GETC, and 7 learning areas were presented for standardization for the GETC, and 6 learning areas were left as raw of the 7, and 1 learning area was adjusted upwards, and no downward adjustments were effected. Now, I just want to say that having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Council noted that apart from the challenges of non-compliance with site-based assessments, the instructions based on SPAs by some centres, Umalusi is satisfied that there were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the credibility and integrity of the November 2021 GETC examination administered by the IB, and the Executive Committee of Council therefore approved the release of the IB November 2021 GETC aided examination. The IB is required to block the results of the 2 candidates implicated in an irregularity and address the directives for compliance and present an improvement plan by the 15th of March 2021. But the Executive Committee of Council is happy to commend the IB for conducting a successful examination despite the challenges presented by COVID. So the last body that deals with NSE is SACAI, or the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. And according to the enrollment statistics received from SACAI, there were 4,181 candidates who registered for the exam. And that presented almost a 2,000 increase in the numbers of the previous year. There were a total of 25 subjects, and of those 5 subjects, 12 remained as raw, and 5 subjects were adjusted upwards, and 8 were adjusted downwards. And so 48% raw, 20% upwards, and 32% downwards. And EXCO had studied evidence and noted that apart from some administrative errors and omissions identified during the writing of the exam, there were no systemic irregularities. Also in this case, that might have compromised the credibility and integrity of the exam, the NSC exam administered by SACAI, and therefore EXCO approves the release of the SACAI November 2021 NSC exam. But the SACAI is required to address the directives for compliance and improvement highlighted in the quality assurance of assessment report and submit an improvement plan by the 15th of March 2022. But Council wants SACAI to give particular attention to recurring matters of non-compliance. EXCO is also happy to commend SACAI for conducting a successful examination despite the challenges presented by COVID. So before we turn to the Department of Higher Education and Training, there's one more which is the GETC administered by Sakai, where there were 387 candidates who wrote the exam at 44 centers, and they presented 7 learning areas for standardization, and raw marks were accepted for 6 of those subjects, and 1 learning area was adjusted upwards, and there were no downward adjustments. And the Council is happy to approve the release of the results of the November 2021 GETC certificate, the GETC Adult Basic Education and Training examination administered by Sakai, and we are happy to commend Sakai for conducting a successful examination, but we want Sakai to address the directives for compliance and improvement highlighted in the Quality Assurance Report and present an improvement plan by the 15th of March. So the last assessment body that we will deal with before I close my comments, that is the exams administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. The first one is the GETC, where there were a total of 56,441 candidates who wrote the GETC exam administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. Of them, there are 26 learning areas that they presented for standardization, and of the 26, raw marks were accepted for 12 learning areas and upward adjustments on 6 learning areas and downward adjustments on 8 learning areas. And so 46% were left as raw, 27% upward adjustment, and 31% downward adjustment. The EXCO of Umalusi Council noted that apart from some exam irregularities identified during the writing and marking of examinations, there were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the credibility and integrity of the November 2021 GETC exam administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. And so EXCO approves the release of the results of the GETC ABET examination administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. In respect of identified irregularities, the Department of Higher Education and Training is required to block the results of examination centers and candidates implicated in irregularities, pending the outcome of further DHET investigation and verification by Umalusi. And the DHET is also required to address the directives for compliance and improvement highlighted in the Quality Assurance Report and submit an improvement plan by the 15th of March 2022. EXCO, again, is happy to commend the DHET for conducting a successful examination despite the challenges presented by COVID-19. So we now go to the last one, and that is the NCV, administered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. So we have NCV levels 2 to 4, and together there was a total of 138,351 candidates who registered for November 2021 NCV examinations across those 3 levels. And they wrote the exam across 249 centers. And they sat for 261 subjects across the 3 levels that they presented for standardization. Of the 261 subjects, raw marks were accepted for 131 subjects, or 50% exactly, while upward shifts towards the average historical norm was affected on 91 subjects, and downward shifts on 39 subjects. So in percentage terms, 50% raw, 35% mainly upwards, and 15% mainly downwards. Having studied all the evidence presented, the Executive Committee of Council noted that apart from some examination irregularities identified during the writing and marking of examinations and cases of non-compliance to Internal Continuous Assessment, or ICAS, and Integrated Summative Assessment, ISAT, by some examination centres, there were no systemic irregularities reported that might have compromised the credibility of the November 2021 NCV levels 2 to 4, and the Executive Committee of Council therefore approves the release of the DET November 2021 level 2 to 4 examination results based on the available evidence. But the DET is required to block the results of candidates and centres that fail to comply with ICAS and ISAT requirements pending the outcome of further investigation by DET and verification by Umalusi. And in respect of identified irregularities, the DET is required to block the results of examination centres and candidates implicated in irregularities pending the outcome of further investigation and verification by Umalusi. The DET is also required to address the directives for compliance and improvements highlighted in the Quality Assurance of Assessment report and submit an improvement plan by the 15th of March 2022. The Executive Committee of Council commends the DET for conducting a successful examination despite the challenges presented by COVID-19. Which brings me to the end of the various qualifications, and in conclusion, I'd just like to say one or two things. One is regarding the leakage of Mathematics Paper 2, as Dr. Rakometi has pointed out, and Physical Science Paper 2 in 2020. I wish to make the following comments. That sadly, that matter is still in the hands of the law enforcement agencies since that time. And the investigation is still continuing. Unfortunately, it has taken an inordinately long time for this matter to be resolved. Regarding the 2021 learners who had early access to life sciences and agricultural sciences at centres in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. As Dr. Rakometi has pointed out, this is subject of an ongoing investigation, so we do not want to give away too much detail and information. Sufficient to say the investigations are continuing. However, in the meantime, the results of the implicated learners will be blocked until they are cleared of any wrongdoing. This means that Umalusi can still nullify the results of candidates who are found guilty of having benefited from early access of question papers. As I conclude, I wish to thank the CEO, Dr. Rakometi, for his leadership, as well as his wonderful team of senior managers and staff who work tirelessly and against stringent timelines to deliver the best of the country. Now, I particularly also want to thank Dr. Lucky Tunyan, who last year he wasn't Dr. Tunyan. This year he is. I want to congratulate him for that. But he often does work in the background, and he's the reason why we are here together today. I just want to acknowledge him. Since also this is my last opportunity to do so, the council that I chair, the term of office comes to an end, and I will no longer be eligible, having served my term, as well as some members of council. So I wish you well, Dr. Rakaleti, and the team. And I should never forget that to thank the members of the Assessment Standards Committee of Council under the leadership of Professor Banner. You know, he's an engineer. I've got great respect for engineers because they always solve problems. And he's done that so well this year again. So on behalf of Council, I wish to extend our hearty congratulations to all the learners who have done well in the examination. Warm congratulations also to their teachers and their parents and guardians, and all those who have supported these learners in their studies. There will be those that have succeeded, but there will also be some who did not succeed. But I want to encourage you not to give up, because there's always another chance for you this year, 2021. So continue to work hard, and you will do better this year and reap the benefit of your efforts. So I wish everyone all the very best for 2022, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Prof. Volnik. And let me take this opportunity to thank the CEO of Umalusi for his opening remarks as well. I will now open the floor for questions. And if I could just get an indication of the name of the colleague who's asking the question, the media house they represent, and we will take it from there. Thank you very much. And any questions? Yes, ma'am. Norma.
From ENCA. I'm really interested with regards to this issue of early access to papers. I know the body, the quality assurance, says that they can't give us much detail right now, but I think South Africans would like to know exactly the extent of this issue. How many papers or in how many subjects was this issue picked up, and how widespread? I know you've identified KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. How many learners or candidates are we looking at that have been identified? And also, I noticed you said for the DBE NSC results where candidates were identified to have either blue copy or got an early access, those results should be blocked. But then in the IEB examinations, you said nullify. I'm not sure if there's a difference between the two. For now, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other question? No other question? Yeah?
On the example from the SAPC,
Yes.
how rife are these irregularities in the system? Are you picking them up from the exam room, or are they happening before you get to the exam room?
Thank you. I think there was audible enough. Just press the button in front of you. There's a mic. Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Since there aren't any other questions, I also wanted to just get clarity from the body with regards to the 170,000 more candidates in 2021 than in 2020. Are those just grade 11s, should I say, that were coming in from the previous year, or is it maybe students that have also failed and were trying again? Also, have any arrests been made so far in terms of the leaking of papers in 2021. I had another one, but that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I should give the panel a chance to respond, and then we'll take another round of questions. Please.
Yeah, maybe before Dr. Akamisi comes in, maybe I should just comment, Norma, on the questions that you raised. And I'm sure my colleagues on the panel will add to it. And also the SABC, the question about how it's originated, how it gets identified. The thing about this unfortunate incident only happened at a school in Gauteng, 2 learners, so one in Gauteng and one in KwaZulu-Natal. And you asked what subjects. They were possession of life science papers, and that was early in the morning at 8:15 on the day they wrote the exam, and they admitted that they were part of the chat group, and that I don't want to go into much detail. And if Dr. Akamisi feels it appropriate, he will add to that. But the early opening of life sciences paper 1 and 2, clearly. And then there was agricultural science, paper 1. And then by paper 2, it was too late. By the time the paper was opened, it could not be distributed in India, so it had no impact. And unfortunately, when it was distributed, the answers, some of those answers were wrong. It doesn't make the deed less serious, but it didn't have an effect. But there were not many students, not many learners. Very few were affected, and the time was too short to have a widespread impact. So I hope that answers your question about the SABC asking about how these things. There were whistleblowers that brought us to the attention of the education authorities. So yeah, this is what's going on. And so they acted on that, and then there were interviews, both one-on-one, telephone as well, and investigative marking, and so on. So there's a standard method. I think I've said enough. Dr. Akamisi, do you want to say anything about that? I will come back to the 170,000
Okay.
additional.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, Prof. Yeah, now indeed, South Africans may want to know more about these matters. However, we also have to be careful not to compromise the investigation. Because immediately you give more, you are letting the crooks, the criminals, to cover their tracks. So we want to be limited in what we share in this session. At the right time, when the investigations would have been completed, the Department of Basic Education will submit a report to Umalusi, and we'll see how we share this information with the South Africans. Yes, indeed, in the case of the DBE, we have said block the results because the investigations are still going on. In the case of the IEB, where we say nullify, it is because the investigations have been concluded, and we can conclusively say, this is how we conclude the matter, nullify. Therein lies the difference. We cannot nullify until the investigations are completed. I think that is clear enough. Right, the irregularities, the colleague from the SABC is asking, when are they identified? Are they identified before or after the examinations are written? They differ. They differ. We don't have those that are identified before only and after. It's a mixed bag. Some will be identified before the commencement of the examinations, where remedial measures can be taken, where possible, depending on the time frames. Some are identified later, some are reported later, some are identified with the investigative marking that Prof. Horning has referred to. So it's a mixed bag. It will be difficult for us to say they're identified before or after. It's a mixture. Prof has said he's going to comment about the 174 more learners. I'm not going to get into that unless he asks me to add. Regarding the arrests for the 2020 physical sciences papers, we do not know. The only arrest that was made in 2020 was one arrest of a person who was working at the private printing company. That is the information that we have. That's what we have. We have not had more from the law enforcement agencies, unfortunately. As Prof has said, this matter of physical sciences and mathematics of 2020 is still with the law enforcement agencies, and they have not updated us on the latest on the matter. Yeah, Prof?
I just for complete openness, and because it's also an issue that's connected with this 2021 November exam, was the life orientation, which is written in September, and the day before. So life orientation now has a paper which counts 20%. SBA is 80%. It's a continuous decision. But in this one case, there has been though it's limited, there was some porousness, let me put it that way, which originated in KZN, in this paper, and but the results of 7 provinces, Limpopo, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Gauteng, Free State, Northwest, they are going to be released, and 4 candidates in Mpumalanga, and 19 in KZN are affected. So it's not a systemic issue. So we don't have to. I think I've already given enough of that. Just going back to the 170,000, yes, it is a big number. And your question was, where do they come from? And the progress learners account for 60,000, just over 60,000, 370, and then there were repeaters, which only 2%. So that, the 2% and the progress learners together make 75,000. So there's still another 100,000, over and above the normal. And they came from grade 11. And I don't know. We have to look at the evidence. I don't want to make rash statements. Why? I think that it is fair to say that more students passed grade 11 into grade 12. Came into grade 12 from grade 11. We can be more clear about the reasons once we do the necessary and research and gather the evidence.
Thank you very much. Mama, please go ahead. Yeah.
Slindalo again. Just one last one from me. I know the investigations are still at a sensitive stage, but has the leak been identified? Where is the issue coming from? Is it issues around security of the question papers? How are these papers being accessed early and just minutes or moments before these learners are supposed to sit down? And at what point does Umalusi say that this affects the integrity of the exams? What's the extent supposed to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Smedelo. See you.
Maybe I have to come in here. Before I do, let me just comment on something that has not been asked. It is about the dated report 190191, engineering studies N1 to N3 examinations, why we are not having their results approved here, it is because they have been postponed by the Department of Higher Education and Training to January and February 2022. This was due to the late commencement of the trimester, the third trimester in colleges because of the challenges and changes brought about by COVID-19. You may want to know that we are not able to pronounce because the examinations are still running now. So Linda, what has happened here is that, as Prof has indicated, there will be people who open the question papers before the stipulated time, which is 30 minutes before the commencement of a session. It could either be a morning session, which is 9 o'clock, then they have to open at 8:30. If it is an afternoon session, 2 o'clock session, 1:30. Now, in this instance, evidently the papers were opened before the scheduled time. And they were shared on a WhatsApp group. And that has compromised the examinations. Because then they be shared on a WhatsApp group, and that has compromised the paper because the reason why they are open 30 minutes before the commencement of the examination is for the distribution. Because some students write in the hall, and the distribution has to start early in order to allow time for that distribution to happen. And also, with early examinations, students have to be allowed reading time to read the question paper, to make up their minds if there are choices that they have to make, and so forth and so on, and not for any other purpose. But immediately they are shared on WhatsApp group, you can see that there's been some chicanery there, that they were not open in the examination room. Actually, when they are opened in the examination room, the chief invigilator has to be there with the invigilators, and he has to show the learners to say, look, we are opening now, in front of the learners, not in the office anywhere, or along the road as the papers are going to be distributed. So those papers, then we say they are compromised because they've been shared on a WhatsApp group before the commencement of the examination. I think that is clear enough now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll take the lady in front and then the colleague at the back will follow. Thank you.
Dr. Kafo Supporter from Kaya FM. I'd just like to know, you had mentioned that children who are part of these WhatsApp groups where leaks may happen, is there a channel for learners who feel that they're being implicated in something they're not part of because they would have maybe just joined the group, and now if you say all of them are implicated, is there a clear channel for learners who want to perhaps fight back, so to speak, or defend themselves or distance themselves from being part of the league?
Okay, again from the SABC. Umalusi say they're happy with the quality and the standard of the results.
Thank you. See you.
Maybe I should start with Onke. A definite yes. A definite yes. We can vouch for the quality of these examinations. We have applied our rigorous quality assurance processes to ensure that every step of the way we maintain quality according to policy. So Prof. Volning, as he has pronounced that these results have been approved, it is because we are satisfied about the quality of these exams. Right. The learners who are on the WhatsApp group, I said in my statement that would discourage them from participating because they get automatically implicated. Immediately, they are on a WhatsApp group where question papers are shared in this manner. And then they become part of the investigation. They may be innocent. They may be having good intentions of being in the WhatsApp group. So I said in my statement that if I were them, immediately the examinations commence, I would withdraw from the group. Maybe they lead up, maybe a week before you can be there, but immediately you get closer to the exams, you can withdraw. Sharing ideas is good. Now, you say, are they having a mechanism where they can appeal the blocking of the results? I say yes. Because there are going to be hearings and representations made. And each and every student affected is going to have an opportunity to present his or her case. So the door is not closed. They'll be allowed to present their case, and whoever will be adjudicating on it will be able to say a person is innocent or not. Because there are people who then get implicated when they are passive participants in the group. They did not cheat. But the paper just gets into the WhatsApp group, boom, and you have sight of it. You see the paper. You are compromised because you've seen the paper before the stipulated time. Thank you.
I don't really have anything to add, but just to agree with Dr. Akmes. It now turns out to be a dangerous practice to join a WhatsApp group if you are in the tree. And if teachers and parents should discourage the learners or their children from doing that, because exactly Dr. Akmes has explained very carefully and clearly why you can become compromised. I just wanted to also just make a comment about the quality of the examination. Yeah, here I speak as John Volman. There are people, if you read the media, there's a lot of pessimism about the state of education. And there's a feeling, if you read some of those articles, that everything is going down. I personally have every reason to believe that slowly but surely we are a nation on the rise. And I say that because I can see that learners are trying their best. Teachers are trying their best. The Department of Basic Education is trying its best, and all the other system bodies. So why should I believe that everything is going to decline? I simply don't accept that. And all we can do at Umalusi is to say, if there is an improvement, that improvement must be buttressed by integrity and honesty.
Thank you, Prof. Any other questions? Maybe before we conclude, just to indicate that the Department of Basic Education does have a hotline number that people can call to report incidents of cheating during the exams. So Umalusi also has such a number. We encourage people to check our websites to get those hotline numbers and call them. Now, to conclude the program, I will now give over to Professor Umalusi Approval to give us the concluding remarks and the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I need a course on somebody. Proper standardization. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Thank you. Chair, thank you very much, and I really wanted to make a few concluding comments, and as in my capacity as chair of the Assessment Standardization Committee, and to say that the process is actually a necessary process. Is that okay? Thank you. It's rigorous. It's detailed. There's about 15 people on the committee, all senior academics, senior intellectuals who in their daily lives apply their minds to the business of education, to the business of analysis. And this group gathers for, I think, 2 weeks on a trot, including Saturdays and Sundays. And the debates are furious, and discussions are strong. The committee relies very heavily on statistical approaches. And it's not my intention to give you a lecture on statistical methods in this case. But what we're always mindful of is that these are decisions that cannot be made purely by computers or purely on mathematical equations. That what it requires is a combination of fine minds but also warm hearts who understand the context of what it is we're trying to do in standardizing a set of exam results. Because we are always mindful of what it means to the candidates who sit and write. And for those, many in this room, will understand when I say we come from a history where access to education was structurally denied for unspeakable purpose. And people were prevented from getting access because it was intended that you didn't get access. And in the ABET exams, in the GTC exams, in the NSC exams, we are dealing with candidates who see this as an opportunity to give meaningful expression to a dignified life, to the possibility of a dignified life. And really, that's what education offers. And people may not be able to say it like that, but that's what they're expecting out of it. And in the way in which we standardize exams, in the way in which we apply our minds to the process, we have to keep in mind that what we're looking at is an accumulated history. For those who write National Senior Certificate, we're actually judging 12 years of learning. There's a very small proportion of those who enter grade 1 in this country, an unacceptably small proportion, who will end up in grade 12. And in many cases, that decision is taken through social context, through pressures, through stumbling blocks that are sometimes overwhelming. For those who make it to grade 12, for those who make it to sit for the NCV exams, we have to think carefully about what that means and why we want to standardize. Now, of course, it would be rational for an employer or a university or a FET college to say, we want students who are guaranteed to pass. We want students who are guaranteed to do well in their jobs. That would be irrational. But what they can say is we would like to receive students or young people with a piece of paper in their hand that has meaning and that we can draw confidence from. That when you say this is a B or a C or an A, that has meaning, and that meaning is reproducible, and that we can draw intelligent responses from that document. And that really is what Umalusi does, what the standardization process does, and what it means to give confidence in a system that is trying to give better expression of meaning to people's lives. And so really, as I've chaired this process for 5 years now, and it's been for me a remarkably transformative view of what we're trying to do in this country. And I must say I agree fully with Professor Volmink. Our experience of this year, 2021, is that the system is settling. While you heard the statistics that said we've adjusted so many up and so many down, etc., those adjustments were generally not large. Generally, they were very small adjustments that required us to make sure that this cohort is not unfairly disadvantaged because of factors that were outside of their immediate learning experience or opportunity, or the extent to which they brought hand in mind to the task of improving their studies. That's what we try to do, and I think this year I'm very confident in saying the system is settling. The system is finding its feet. I mean, it's a remarkable thing that there were no reports of alleged leakages this year. That's an important step we've taken. The system is strengthening. It is becoming a lot more confident in its own abilities. And without that confidence, social institutions collapse, and the value of what it means to arrive with an examination result is reduced. And all you do is you undermine the hopes and dreams of people. And so we're very careful that we keep that in mind, that we ensure that we keep people's hopes alive, and that we get an exam system that those who have to interpret it can interpret with confidence. My sense is that 2021 was a year in which I can confidently say we're on the upward trend. The system is giving more confidence. And thanks to a wonderful, and I'm not just saying this because they're here, but an Umalusi team that that was unbelievably hard to make sure that this process is maintained. And so with that, Chair, thank you very much, and I really want to say it's been a pleasure to go through these exams this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Bolin. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this brings the proceedings to an end. You will get the copy of the statement either electronically or physical copy if you want. And after this, obviously, we will also take a few interviews. I can coordinate that for you. Lastly, there will be some refreshments that our host here will serve. Thank you. Thank you very much.